We're here. We're live. It's noon. You know what time that means on every like third Friday of the month, usually, given that there's an even number of weeks in the month. Regardless, you know what time it is. It's time for Here For It. I'm here for it. I'm also Connor, but I happen to be here for it. It's time for another live Q&A with me. Uh Connor, how do we start these? At this point, you already know. You already know the answer. The absolutely up to me weather quality report. Hot, hot, better. It's getting better. It wasn't like 90 at all this week, so that's pretty awesome. Again, it's great. It's great breathable fleece weather. If like me, you are allergic to wearing just a t-shirt. Um, so it's been a little bit rainy, a little bit cloudy. I'm just saying, that's pretty good weather. Um, welcome everybody to another wonderful edition. Um, I received very good feedback about Connor's sort of driving encouragement, given that, again, a lot of you listen to this while you're driving in your car, in which case we will now also provide a small section of Connor's in your car driving with you encouragement. Wow, you are driving really great. This is going very well. Thank you so much for taking me along with you. This is a beautiful drive. Oh, look at over there, a tree. Um, Thank you. And that concludes, obviously, our driving section for today. We got a couple of questions. We got some good questions. And we're kind of gonna breeze through these. We're gonna take them as they come. All right. Some really decent. I think these are common questions that I've had, so I'm going to answer them here so that you might have an answer to reference. Um, Question the first, Connor. I had a client whose phone broke, and they are looking to reach out to me and coordinate with me via Facebook Messenger. Can I do that? Connor's answer is please don't. Um, I would say that's usually not an awesome idea. And I want to be super clear here in saying the reason is it isn't typically super client specific. I don't want you to think that um, your client would somehow abuse this. But the truth of it is, if you are connecting via social media, there always exists an ability for a client to then know more about you than you might want to be willing to share, to know more about your location and your family and the goings on in your life. And it really can kind of produce a little bit of a uh, boundary conundrum later on, right? It may seem incredibly innocuous, and oftentimes it is. I don't want to say that every time it's going to be a worst case scenario, but I've seen this go wrong enough times that I really feel like, from my professional experience, the best thing to do would be to not ahead of time, right? Plan in person, plan on where you're going to meet. If there is an issue with a phone, it's a great thing to work on during a session, right? It's a great thing to help and support and help them figure out how to kind of resolve. These are uh solution that is social media. One of the most common concerns I get, especially during orientation, is, well, how am I going to share information with my client? What if I don't want my client knowing all of this stuff about me? And social media is full of information about ourselves, usually, that we may not want shared. And I always say err on the side of caution, err on the side of this is a boundary that I'm going to continue to set with my clients. And I would say avoid the Facebook Messenger shortcut. Hopefully too, this is a temporary issue, right? Typically, if there's a phone issue, it's something that can be resolved in a few weeks. But Facebook, it can sometimes feel a little bit weird if you, when you're done, you say, "All right, goodbye," and then you unfriend them. They might take that personally, and that might harm the relationship down the road. Or you don't do that, and then they continue to have access to a bunch of information during your tenure here, your time with them, and if you decide to leave or move, or you guys end up not working together, they will have then, I think, a line to you, and that sometimes can cause issues, right? I want to be upfront and say it might not be every time, but if it happens to you once, you're probably never going to do it again, and I would way rather sort of save you guys the trouble and the grief and the difficulty, and just say probably don't do that. Um, on a similar vein, another question was, we had a client who moved on from services, and now, mom is calling worker to check up and see how things are and just kind of chat. Um and here again, I would say this is sort of the boundary thing. I it is our policy, right, that we don't continue on relationships with people kind of after they're done working with us. That is sort of a professional thing. Um, I do want to recognize this is a human field. This is a field where we do get connected to the people that we support, and we do want to help them and see them do well. And so I'm not trying to say that the, inclination to reach out and reconnect and get updates and give updates is something that you should not necessarily have. I totally get it, right? But I think that it does create an expectation that I do think is very difficult. And that expectation is, okay, well, now anytime there's more information given, or it creates kind of this, well, we met at work, but now we're not really working together. So it busts through, I think, some of the professional confinement that we try to have in order to keep these relationships something that we can leave off the clock, right? Once we're all done for the day, I want you to have the time to relax and unwind and not think about work. That's an incredibly healthy and super important part of this kind of work. You have to be able to do that. And anytime you are kind of blowing through these professional boundaries that we sort of have set up in place, you end up risking the sort of sanctity of your evening, of your morning, of your anytime, right? Your weekends, time that you need to rest and restore and kind of have a break. A while ago, I had a discussion about burnout, and I would circle back here and say, these are some of the factors that at the time seem rather innocuous. These are little things that you don't think are going to end up compounding and creating a situation that becomes untenable because you really can't turn off the work brain, right? Because there are people reaching out to you outside of work hours, and you associate them with work, and oftentimes they may be requesting things that require something of you, and that is not usually a great way to recharge. And so I want to again acknowledge this seems innocuous, and it likely is, right? I don't think oftentimes people come through this trying to be in any way malicious or unkind. That's not fair, and I don't assume ill intention with the people that we serve or their family or friends. However, you can cause unintended harm. And I think that sometimes by not recognizing that this is a job that requires time off, time apart, time away from thinking about work, people can inadvertently burn staff out. Um, and so I would caution you. I would say that is not a great idea. I think that very often we want to see how our clients are doing after they've left, right? That's, I think, one of the more difficult things about this position is a lot of the times we do a lot of work to get people set up, and we think they're humming along and doing really great, and then they end services and we have to say, but did it continue on? Are they doing well? Are they using what I taught them? And so I think that there is sort of this professional curiosity to see how they're doing. And that is certainly true for other people in their life as well. And we become a part of their lives, right? I want to be, again, very upfront in saying I don't think that it's coming from a cruel or intrusive spot from this mom asking, hey, can we connect and I can see how you're doing, right? We work in a very intimate way with our clients. It's intimate in a unique way. It isn't you know physical cares. It isn't anything residential. It isn't anything like that, but it is still very intimate. I am every day, weekly, going into somebody's life who started out as a pure stranger for me, and I am now dealing with some oftentimes pretty serious issues, right? Some pretty heavy things, some pretty weighty things can come across my way when I'm working with somebody. And there is a familiarity that I think we all gain with the people who are consistently in our clients' lives. And I understand. All of this is incredibly long-winded. We all know that I'm long-winded. This is an incredibly long-winded way of me saying I'm sure that they mean well, but I would resist the urge to have that phone call, just because I think that it can open the road to some more difficulty and potential burnout. And even if it isn't this person, it may be the next, right? I think sometimes we can learn to say, "Oh, for sure, I can take that. I can check in. I can see how things are going." And then very quickly begin to say yes to more and more people, and then again we find ourselves heaped with people who are kind of all around us throughout the day, throughout the evening, requesting information from us and taking us out of our own sort of space of peace that we need in order to recuperate and do this job really, really well. So, as an answer to that question, I would say, oh, that's so sweet. Please don't give them a call. That usually won't go super great. We are cruising through these. Last question. I have a client who is, we do a lot of errand running. They live in a group home. And staff have found out now that this client is potentially buying items for other people in the house. And is this something that we should report? What should we do about this? Spectacular question. And for anybody wondering, I did already let them know, hey, for sure, reach out to your case manager or their field coordinator, because we're probably going to be making a mark report on that, right? So don't worry. I know. For those of you who are saying, oh, but Connor, I know. But to explain the thought process a little bit more, right? There are obviously a multitude of factors that we need to take into account whenever we are looking at a claim like this, right? First is we got to judge the veracity a little bit, right? Is the client actually buying these items for other people in the home? I don't know, but if it's true, I'm worried about it, and if I'm worried about it, it means it's something that I report, right? Um, and what would we be reporting? Well, I think that it's important, and I talk about this for all of you when you guys come through kind of basic training. But I'll reiterate it here. It isn't even just the client who's, for whose sake I want to make this report. It is, but it's for the other people who are residing in this group home as well, right? I think that it's easy to think I need to just report stuff that pertains to my client, and I understand that because that is, I think, the easiest way to interpret a lot of the rules around mandated reporting. But mandated reporting expands to everybody that we see, right? As a mandated reporter, if I witness some sort of suspected maltreatment, I must report it, right? And that's full stop. That doesn't matter who it is. I need to report it. And in settings like group homes, other residential facilities, there is an ability, I think, to really insulate some of the people who work there or some of the processes there uh, from proper scrutiny, right? It can be easy if a client really has nobody coming in to visit them and really no way of reaching out to others, it would be very difficult for them to ever get something reported, right? And I want the fact that we are in here with our clients and we see these sorts of things. we are oftentimes the only outside presence that this person may be able to rely on to get a report out. And so I want to be understanding if, and this is all if, right? I'm not trying to sling mud. But if there is, a group home that is withholding items from a client, and so our client is going out and buying them, well, that might be a problem, right? If they are unable to have the funds, well, I'm worried about money management. Then I also don't want our client having to be the person who is who people are relying on to get their items, right? Story time, right after I take a sip of this because I'm very thirsty. It wouldn't be, frankly, a real Connor training if I did not have some sort of story. So obviously, I do. When I was a case manager, my favorite way to start pretty much any story I tell. When I was a case manager, I had a client who lived in it'd be a community residential setting now. It was a corporate foster care, is what the term was when I was doing this. Um, and they were always talking about how they would go grocery shopping, and I thought, okay, cool. You have a little freezer in your room, and that's where you get your snacks. This all makes sense. And then randomly, this is purely through circumstance. I discovered this. I went out to do a meeting. I had the time written down incorrectly, so I showed up early at the house. And when I did, she was getting out of the van, uh, and they were unloading groceries. And I said, "Wow, that's going to be a lot to fit in your little mini fridge." And she says, "Oh, no, no, this is I do this and I shop for the whole house, right?" And that's worrying. That's not good, right? Because this home gets reimbursement from the state for providing meals for everybody, right? They are supposed to be the one buying it. And after I reported this, there was an investigation. It turns out that they've actually been using my client's funds at the time to purchase groceries for the whole house, which is really bad. And this is not something that my client was going to necessarily identify as wrong, right? It's a case manager's job. It's a group home's job. It's our staff's job to be able to recognize whether or not a provider is operating within their bounds. It's really not a client's job, right? Their job mainly is to be receiving care, living a more independent life, and receiving support, right? Their job is not to be able to articulate literally everything that every service is supposed to be doing for them. They're supposed to have the ability to, right? That's why they have the paperwork. But realistically, they are not there for accountability, right? They are there to receive care from people. And so in this instance, right, I had to file that report, and it was a good thing that I did because this home had been taking money from my client and realistically maybe others, right? Uh in order to buy groceries and in theory, right, pass the savings along to the people who are working there. And that's a problem, right? My client would not have reported that on her own. And because it's a restricted setting where it isn't like there are other staff coming in from other agencies, they're all from one company. It would be rare if it hadn't been for my inability to tell time correctly, I guess. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have even discovered this. And this is something that could have still been going on today. And so I think that it is important to understand that I don't know the circumstances over what this is. But if I'm having a client report something like that, I'm concerned that maybe something isn't happening that should in the house. And even if it is, I really can't have my client going out and buying a bunch of stuff that might need to be provided by the house instead, right? There is a certain level of appropriateness that these services are supposed to have. So incredibly long-winded way. I'm very very good at this. Um, very very long-winded way of saying that is something that we should know about immediately, right? Please let your field coordinator know because that is something that we are most likely going to need to be making a mark report for, because we can't have especially in some sort of group home setting. I don't know what restrictions are there, and I don't know what the group home is supposed to be purchasing and buying for people. I don't know what other people are allowed to purchase with their own money or what their financial situation is, and so I am concerned though that at some point some sort of financial maltreatment is going on, and we file a report, right? And it really isn't. And I want to be clear about this too, because this is the question I've gotten occasionally. We don't need to investigate it. That's not our job. That's Mark's job. That is the job of other people at the state. Their job is to investigate and examine the sort of veracity of our report. It's not our job to gather all of this evidence, right? Do we oftentimes? Yeah, because the evidence has sort of fallen into our lap, right? But that's not our job. The threshold for us isn't do we have evidence. This is we're not a court. You're not a lawyer. You don't need to you don't need to have the evidence to convict, right? This is purely do we suspect that some sort of maltreatment is occurring, and if the suspicion is there, then the investigation can happen. So in this case, please reach out to your field coordinator. It is something that we may very well need to report, and will probably get followed up on by the state. So really great questions this week. Yeah, I think those are and thank you to the person who asked all of them. Man, I really appreciate your questions. But also, they are very representative of a lot of common questions that I get from staff, and have historically received for my entire career of doing this kind of job. So, very indicative. If you've ever asked any of these questions and thought to yourself, well, I don't really know how to handle it. Well, now you do. Don't ever feel uncomfortable reaching out to me. I love to explain this kind of stuff, but I do want you to know that these are very common questions to have. So thank you for asking them. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. I genuinely appreciate you guys continuing to show up. Happy August. We're getting into state fair season, and that's exciting for me because I'll chow down on some fair food. So I hope that you all have a spectacular weekend. We're heading into again. You're probably, if you're watching this not on Friday, August 24th. I hope whatever weekend is next for you is also great. Right? I'm not trying to exclude you, but I hope this weekend in particular is great for those who are watching live right now. I hope you all have an excellent weekend. I hope you all have a great week. I hope you all have a great night. Honestly, I just hope you have just great everything. And I will see you guys next week at 2 on Friday for another edition of Here For It. In the meantime, feel free, shoot me a text, send me an email, let me know what your questions are, and I will be answering them next week. Have a good one, everybody, and I will see you later.